What makes a tree unforgettable? A week of flowers, color hidden beneath bark, a crown shaped by wind, or a trunk so large that people become points beside it? These 20 trees begin near homes and city streets, then carry us into America's wildest landscapes. Tree 1 is the Flowering Dogwood, Cornus Florida. In an eastern woodland, its pale crown seems to float beneath taller oaks before the forest has fully turned green. 4 broad white bracts create a clean rhythm among the dark trunks. At their center, notched tips frame a small cluster of true flowers. By autumn, red fruit and crimson leaves replace the spring white. Its branches often form gentle horizontal tiers, so the crown remains easy to read, even when the woodland behind it is complex. A dogwood can brighten a backyard, but in the woods, it feels like a layer of soft light suspended beneath the canopy. Spring can arrive before the leaves. Tree 2, the Eastern Redbud, Cercis canadensis, covers bare branches with pink and violet flowers before its heart-shaped foliage unfolds. The blossoms appear along young twigs and older wood, tracing the tree's entire branching pattern in color. Against a forest edge still gray from winter, one redbud seems to glow from within. As the flowers fade, the new leaves fill the same branching line with fresh green. The display is brief, but it makes the change of season impossible to miss. But the next spring tree replaces lightness with weight. Tree 3 is the Southern Magnolia, Magnolia grandiflora. Broad, evergreen leaves form a deep green crown, and their warm brown undersides appear whenever the foliage turns. Then large white flowers open against that dark background. Beside a porch or across a broad lawn, a mature magnolia has the presence of architecture. Even without flowers, it gives the landscape structure. Each bloom carries thick petals, a waxy surface, and enough visual weight to dominate the frame without any other color. During bloom, the contrast makes each white flower look deliberately placed. Tree 4 became one of America's most familiar spring spectacles. The Yoshino Cherry, Prunus xy-yedoensis, surrounds Washington's tidal basin with clouds of pale blossoms. A single flower is restrained. Thousands opening together soften every branch until the trees seem to lose their solid structure. Reflections repeat the crowns across the water and expand the scene beyond any one specimen.
The trees are strongest as a group, with one pale crown repeating after another around the water. The transformation lasts only briefly. That short window is part of the attraction. A familiar city changes completely, and then the pale canopy disappears. The 5th tree turns warm American streets violet. Jacaranda mimosifolia is native to South America, but in frost-free cities such as Los Angeles and parts of the Southwest, it can transform an avenue into a seasonal landmark. Fine fern-like leaves keep the crown airy. During peak bloom, fallen flowers carry the color onto sidewalks and lawns. The violet-blue flowers are strongest against pale pavement, stucco walls, and a clear sky, where the color has room to spread. One jacaranda is ornamental. A repeated row changes the atmosphere of an entire street. The journey begins with trees that can reshape a garden, a lawn, or a city block. Now the scale widens. The next 5 transform roads, hillsides, mountain groves, and winter forests through leaves, movement, and bark rather than flowers. Number 6 is the sugar maple, Acer saccharum. Through summer, it may look calm and familiar. A broad crown, balanced branches, and layers of green shade. In fall, that same structure holds yellow, orange, scarlet, and deep red at once, Across the Northeast, repeated maples turn hillsides into broad fields of warm color. The same tree may show several stages at once, with green still hiding beneath orange and scarlet at the outer crown. One leaf is precise and recognizable. Thousands together can make a road, a house, or an entire forest edge glow. Watch the crown of tree 7. The Quaking Aspen, Populus tremuloides, carries leaves on flattened, flexible stems, so even a light breeze makes the canopy shimmer. In summer, each turn flashes green and silver. In fall, whole groves become luminous yellow against dark mountains and evergreen forest. Many trunks may rise from one connected root system, which helps explain the unity of the grove. Seen from inside the grove, the repeated white trunks create depth, while the leaves continue moving overhead. Pale stems, light crowns, and constant movement make the landscape feel active rather than anchored. Tree 8 concentrates an entire autumn into one irregular crown. The Black Tupelo, Nyssa sylvatica, can shift through yellow, orange, crimson, scarlet, and purple, with several colors appearing at the same time.
Gray bark and open branching keep the display from feeling uniform. A maple grove can spread color across a hillside. Its uneven outline lets blue sky and darker branches remain visible between the colored leaves. A single tupelo burns more like one bright ember inside the surrounding forest. The 9th tree remains striking after every leaf is gone. Paper birch, Betula papyrifera, is recognized by pale bark that separates into thin, curling layers. In a northern forest, white trunks create vertical rhythm between darker evergreens. Summer brings fresh green leaves, and fall brings clear yellow, but winter reveals the strongest composition. Thin curls and dark horizontal marks animate the peeling bark, while a stand of trunks becomes a sequence of repeated white lines. Snow, shadow, black branch markings, and white bark reduce the scene to a quiet graphic pattern. The 10th tree saves its brightest colors for the trunk. Rainbow Eucalyptus, Eucalyptus deglupta, is native to the tropical Pacific, but it grows in Hawaii and a few frost-free American landscapes. As strips of outer bark peel away, fresh green tissue appears, then changes through blue, violet, orange, and reddish-brown. The colors overlap instead of forming clean stripes. Each newly exposed patch begins green, while older sections deepen into warmer colors, so the surface records several ages at once. At full scale, the trunk remains tall and elegant, but the bark itself becomes an abstract painting made by growth and time. Which kind of beauty would hold your attention longest? Flowers, fall color, moving leaves, or extraordinary bark? Keep that first answer in mind. The next trees are inseparable from their landscapes. Water, desert, lava, coastal weather, and the textures of each place shape what we see. Tree 11 is the southern live oak, Quercus virginiana. An old live oak spreads outward through immense horizontal limbs instead of rising in a narrow column. Some branches descend close to the ground before lifting again, creating sheltered rooms beneath the crown. In the coastal southeast, Spanish moss may soften the heavy structure. The tree can frame a house, cover a road, or stand alone in an open field. From beneath the branches, the view changes again. Light enters in narrow openings, while the limbs form a ceiling of wood and moss. Its low, expansive canopy makes the land feel settled and older than the buildings around it. Tree 12 rises directly from water. The Bald Cypress, Taxodium distichum, is a conifer that drops its soft, feathery foliage each year. In southern swamps, straight trunks emerge from dark water beside woody projections known as cypress knees. Reflections double the vertical lines, while mist separates one trunk from the next. In fall, the foliage turns copper and russet. The trunks repeat into the distance. Near the waterline, textured bark and strange woody shapes rise around the roots. Above the water, the forest feels ordered. Below it, roots, knees, and reflections create a more mysterious pattern. At number 13, the Joshua tree, Yucca brevifolia, turns open desert into a recognizable place. A rough trunk divides into angular branches, each ending in a burst of narrow, pointed leaves. Against the Mojave sky, one silhouette can resemble a gesture, a candelabrum, or a figure standing against the wind. At sunset, the open spacing lets each tree keep a separate silhouette instead of merging into a solid mass. Older trees develop increasingly complex forms. Their beauty is not soft or symmetrical. It comes from distance, endurance, and an outline no other desert plant can reproduce. Tree 14 can grow from young lava, wet forest, or high mountain slopes. The Ohia Lehua, Metrosideros polymorpha, changes from a low, wind-shaped plant to a tall forest tree depending on the conditions around it. Fine clusters of stamens form bright red flowers against small, sturdy leaves. The contrast can be striking. Black lava below, gray sky beyond, and a small red flower held at the edge of the new growth. On new volcanic ground, Ohia can be among the first trees to establish. Its beauty is tied to place through adaptation and renewal, with delicacy and resilience visible on the same branch. The 15th tree stands out through touch and color. Pacific Madrone, Arbutus menziesi, grows along the western coast with smooth bark that peels in thin sheets. Newly exposed surfaces can appear green, copper, cinnamon, or deep red. Broad evergreen leaves remain glossy above clusters of pale flowers and red-orange fruit. On rocky slopes, the trunk often bends into sculptural forms. The peeling surface also changes with light, appearing polished after rain and almost metallic in low sun. Against dark conifers, the warm bark becomes the first detail the eye finds. Has your answer changed yet? The final 5 may change it again. They move beyond gardens, streets, and seasonal display.
Here, wind, shade, fire, fog, altitude, and centuries of survival become part of the tree's visible form. The scale rises, but so does the sense of time. Perfect symmetry would weaken tree 16. The Monterey Cypress, Hesperocypress macrocarpa, is most memorable where wind and salt push it into an uneven coastal shape. Trunks lean, branches flatten, and dense foliage gathers on the sheltered side. On a cliff above gray water, the flattened crown and empty windward space record the prevailing wind. Its form is dramatic because the pressure of the landscape remains visible. Tree 17 creates enclosure rather than spectacle. The Western Red Cedar, Thuya plicata, rises through Pacific Northwest forests with deeply furrowed reddish bark and broad, buttressed roots. Flat sprays of foliage soften the edges of the immense trunk. Moss covers roots and fallen wood, while filtered light separates one green layer from another. At the base, the trunk widens into roots that seem to hold the surrounding soil and fallen wood in place. Bark, shade, roots, and moss deepen the feeling of shelter until the forest seems to close gently around the viewer. At number 18, the Giant Sequoia, Sequoiadendron giganteum, changes every familiar measurement. Its red-orange trunk rises like a wall through the Sierra Nevada forest. Thick, fibrous bark carries black scars from past fires, while the living crown begins far above the people below.
Giant sequoias are the largest trees in the world by volume, but the number matters less than the comparison. A path looks narrow. Nearby trees look ordinary. A person becomes almost weightless beside the trunk, and even a group of visitors can occupy only a small fraction of its width. Looking upward, the eye follows the bark until the crown disappears into surrounding branches. Mass, endurance, and proportion become the entire image. Tree 19 reaches higher. The Coast Redwood, Sequoia sempervirens, grows in the cool, moist belt of Northern California, where ocean fog moves between the trunks. From the forest floor, many crowns disappear from view. Ferns, sorrel, fallen logs, and muted shafts of light keep the space layered rather than empty. Coast redwoods are the tallest living trees, yet the forest rarely feels harsh. Dozens of trunks can recede into fog, while tiny ferns and clover-like sorrel gather beside the massive bark.
Moisture, shadow, and green surfaces soften the height until entering the grove feels like stepping into a vertical world. Tree 20 is the Great Basin bristlecone pine, Pinus longeva. High on dry, cold mountains, it grows where the season is short and the ground appears almost unable to support a tree. Wind, ice, and time strip away sections of bark, leaving pale deadwood twisted beside narrow ribbons of living tissue. Some branches are dead and polished by weather, while others carry short green needles from the few living sections that remain. The crown may be sparse, yet some individuals are among the oldest known non-clonal trees on Earth. It is not lushness, symmetry, or abundance. It is life continuing in a form that openly carries every difficult year. Did the kind of beauty you chose halfway through remain your favorite? Or did one of the final trees change your answer? These 20 trees are not a scientific ranking. They are 20 different answers to what makes a tree unforgettable. Beauty began with flowers and color, then expanded into shelter, adaptation, scale, endurance, and time. A dogwood becomes unforgettable through a white spring canopy. An aspen grove moves as one. A live oak creates shelter. A redwood changes the scale of a forest. A bristlecone turns survival into a visible shape. Which tree would you travel to see in person? Leave its name in the comments.